So this is going to be horizontal analysis on a balance sheet, and this is, I'm using the example that you can do a printout of so you can see the numbers better. I have left off a lot of zeros because I'm working with a much smaller whiteboard than usual. So let's just do this. The earliest year is your base year, so 2014 would be your base year. So what we do is we take the current year minus the base year and we get the change, which would be 25. 125 minus 100. So that's the change. And then we divide the change by the base year. Okay? And that gives us a percentage, 25%. So we can say there's been a 25% change. This year's current assets are 25% more than they were last year. 396 minus 330, change of 66. 66 divided by 330, the base year, would give us a 20% increase in our planned assets. Total assets, we do the 521 minus the 430, change of 91. 91 divided by the base year would give us a percent change of 21.2. We do the same thing with our current liabilities. 91 minus the 70 in the base year, a change of 21. You can see where if you're working with Excel, you can just set this up as a formula and you're kind of done very fast. Okay, so long-term liabilities, the change is 38. 38 divided by the base year gives you 40%. And total liabilities, let's see, we can make this a little clearer here. This is our current, that's our total. And then here's our, I'm going to total our liabilities now. Okay, so 224 minus the 165 is 59. 59 divided by the base year gives us 35.8% increase in our liabilities. Come down to our stockholders' equity. We have a 46 change in common stock, 46 divided by the base year. At least you'll have the formulas down by the time we're done. That's a 40% increase in the amount of common stock. And then we come to retained earnings. Oh, that decreased. So we're down 14 from the base year. So it's negative 14 divided by the base year gives us negative 9%. And then we do our total stockholders' equity. Change is 32. 32 divided by the 265. That's a 12.1%. And then we come down and we do the total, which should end up the same as we've got a 91 change. 21.2%. Okay, so we can say the current year's total assets are 21% over what they were last year. We can say the current year's retained earnings are down 9% from what they were last year. Okay, so if we're looking at this, you know, we can do the mechanics of computing it, but then the next step is to analyze it and say, well, gee, what's the meaning of this? And so if you look at it, they've been buying a fair number of assets. Okay, their assets are up over 20%, but retained earnings, that's where the net income is, right? That's the revenues minus expenses. That's down, so they're not generating the money from their operations. Where are they getting the money to finance assets? They're getting it from more current liabilities, a lot more long-term liabilities, and issuing stock. So if this is a mature company, you might be a little worried about this. But if it's a startup company, you'd say, well, that's kind of normal, you know, they got to be buying their assets, they're probably issuing stock to finance it and, you know, taking on debt at this point, and, you know, things will hopefully straighten out. Okay, so that's the first way to compute horizontal analysis, and you can see that you get the percentages. The other way is simply to do it in sort of a one-step format. And either one of these is totally acceptable. It just has to be what makes sense to you. The other way to do it is to simply divide the current year by the base year. And you get 125%. And you would get 120%. And if you look at what we had just done, you can see this is just expressing the same thing in a different way. In other words, this year's current assets were 125% over the base year, rather than saying they increased by 25%. This year's total assets were 121% of what they were in the base year, and instead of saying they were up 21%. I prefer the other way myself, but you're going to see it both ways, and maybe one way makes more sense to you. I accept either way. The other thing to keep in mind is if we had 3 years, say we had 12, 31, 16, both 2015 and 2016 would go back to the base year, because that's going to be the earliest year no matter how many years you have, okay? So you could not do, say this was 130 in 2016, you'd go 130 minus 100. You'd go you'd go all of these minus the base year, minus the base year. You can't go this minus that and this minus that. You always have to have 1 year as the base year, and you're setting everything else in terms of that base year. Okay, so the next one I will do will be some horizontal analysis, but on the income statement.